Hello and welcome to the world as we see it. Um, my name's Lloyd Hobart Mitchell, and I'm an ordinand with the St George's congregation here in Pattaya in Thailand. And my formation, my training to become a priest, is being supervised, overseen in context by Father David Price, who's the chaplain of St George's congregation here. And I like to give some sort of introduction just in case whoever's watching hasn't heard that before. So that's who we are, and the purpose of the world as we see it is, well, I suppose it's threefold really. On the one hand, it enables us as a church to share our Sunday Eucharist as far and as wide as we possibly can, and we stream. Father David has just liked the stream, so that's very, very good to see. So we stream the service on Facebook and YouTube and here on Twitch, which in my opinion is probably the best place to see it because it tends not to go down, whereas from time to time Facebook has been known to. So that's the primary reason, I suppose. The secondary one is more of a personal one on my side, in that I'm starting with, or I have started with, Sarum College, and I'm doing an online 3 years course in ministry, and I think the stream enables me to share the work that I'm doing, and ongoing it will be maybe I'll stream whilst I'm thinking about an assignment or while I'm researching something, quite ad hoc. I will of course be keeping the agenda in the evenings, the same as they always have been, and so we will punctuate the stream in the same way we always have. But I think it will become a bit more interesting as time goes on, as I'm given more research and more assignments to do, and I would like to share with you my thinking, so that I suppose with the main aim of hopefully getting some feedback, because where I am, I'm doing the course a little bit out on a limb because of where we are, and that can be, I suppose it can be a bit isolating. There's Father David and also the former chaplain of the St George's congregation to talk to, but at the same, other members of the congregation to talk to and bounce ideas off, I suppose. But at the same time, I think it would be useful to have more people engaging and commenting, and maybe giving me some ideas, some pointers if I'm losing my way. Now today, the agenda on a Thursday, we started this last week. We asked a controversial question last week, which was if Jesus were on earth today, would he be using social media to spread his message? And the conclusion we came to was yes. Now, since then, I've had a few conversations with people about that function of the stream, to put an issue out there. And the feedback that I've had overwhelmingly has been that it would be better served if at least every other time we are asking a question or talking about a different topic which is not directly related to gospel or church, to actually talk about a pertinent issue of the day. And the pertinent issue of the day, which has been suggested for today, is mental health. So we've got a couple of slides here which I think you might find interesting. And there is talking points. Now, before we go for these talking points, before we go through them, what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of a preamble about mental health and my understanding of it. before we go and have a look at these three little graphics that I'm going to share. My understanding of mental health is that everyone has got it. So mental health as a term is the same as, or similar to, in terms of it's an umbrella term similar to physical health, and a person can be physically well in terms of their health, and in the same way that a person can be mentally well in terms of their mental health. Now, most people will catch a cold once a year, or have something that makes them a bit under the weather. And it's fair to say that most people will have an issue to do with their mental health, which might not be debilitating. It might not stop them functioning or doing their day-to-day, fulfilling their day-to-day responsibilities at all, actually, in the same way that having a cold or hay fever might be inconvenient or annoying, or it may wear you down. It may mean that for a couple of days that year you need to lay in bed, right? Not get up at 6:30 in the morning, but instead get up at 9 o'clock, something like that. Other people at the same time, in terms of their physical health, might have an acute physical health issue, and that might be something like a broken leg, which is far more serious than a cold. It's far more debilitating, and it takes several weeks, if not months, to get over. And some people who have a broken leg, the effects of the broken leg can live with them forevermore, especially if the weather's cold, like in the winter. There might be arthritis. Now, mental health is exactly the same. They might have had a very tough time of it for one reason or another. Maybe they're dealing with grief. Maybe they're dealing with isolation. Maybe they're dealing with loneliness. Maybe they're living with unemployment and they're questioning their own self-worth and their own purpose. And for those people who have maybe a bout of depression, the consequent effects of that might be something which revisits them from time to time if the weather's bad, in the same way as a person who suffered a broken leg. Generally speaking, though, people who had a broken leg and people who have had depression go on to live their lives, not necessarily to suffer those things again. Now, in terms of the last group of people have, and I say the last, there are really two groups left. The last group are people who suffer a chronic illness. So whether that's a lung disorder, whether that's living with asthma, whether it's having a disease, whether it requires going to a hospital to have dialysis. Well, there are some folk who have mental health disorders which are chronic, and they have to, not just they, but also the people who live with them, the people who care for them, have to learn to live with it. It's just part of the, patchwork which makes up that person's identity, part of their character. And so that could include things like manic depression, or as it used to be called, sorry, I always use these old-fashioned terms, so it could be bipolar, or maybe it's somebody suffering from schizophrenia or something. So personality disorders, and there are a whole raft of different things which I'm not really qualified to. I've had some experience in terms of working with folk who have had a range of these illnesses, and they're presented with a range of different behaviours. And I've also gone through tough times when my parents died, or when I had a relationship breakdown, or when I was made redundant from a job which I suppose gave me an identity at the time. So, but I suppose I had a broken leg because I feel like I've gone on, and actually, although there are tough times, although there are periods of bad weather in my life, I don't tend to go back to those places and revisit them in the same way. So I think it was just a broken leg, or the equivalent of. Okay, now I hope that clarifies the way I see it. I hope that reasonably describes a definition. It provides some sort of parameter for what we are talking about today. And when I said there was another group, there are going to be some people who never have a broken leg, who for whatever reason don't get a cold ever. I remember my dad telling us of a chap who, I can't remember if he worked at a distillery, and he worked in a whiskey distillery and didn't have a cold for 40 years or something. Anyway, he retired from the distillery and suffered his first cold in 40 odd years. Anyway, so, we have these anecdotes of people who they don't necessarily need to be, He-Man, they don't necessarily need to be the Uberman, but they, for whatever reason, don't suffer physical health issues, and they don't suffer, I don't appear to suffer, emotional or mental health issues. Now, this brings us to our first slide, which I gave you a little glimpse of earlier. I found this on the internet today. I wish I could tell you the source. I've got 3 slides, and if anyone wants to get in touch and say, I know where that came from, then I'm very happy at a later date to give anyone credit for these slides, okay? But this is, I think, a very nice, very simple graphic which lets you understand what mental health is, and also provides information about what mental health is not. Okay, and I think that's equally important, right? Specifically later on, I'll be talking to you, giving you a couple of anecdotes, okay? And when we come to the anecdote part of the stream, then it will all make sense, I think. Now, where were we? So, mental health, on the left-hand side column, it says mental health is important. Mental health is something everyone has. And when it says something everyone has, that includes those folk who don't present with any negative mental health issues. They don't seem to, and they don't report any kind of emotional or mental health, negative mental health issues. Nevertheless, even if they're fit and healthy, they have physical health and they have mental health, and their mental health might be very good. Now, intrinsically, mental health is linked and probably inseparable from physical health. So those folk who do go to the gym, those folk who do walk their 20,000 steps per day, those people who, are able, they're fortunate enough to live near the swimming pool and they go swimming, they are probably going to be in better physical shape than, again, they don't need to be pumping iron and looking svelte. All they need to be doing is keeping active. Now, they are going to be better off mentally and emotionally because of their physical health, their physical well-being, than a person who maybe works in a factory for 15 hours a day. These folk who work in Amazon, having to wear nappies because they're not allowed a toilet break, right? Well, I would presume that those folk who spend shift after shift on their feet for minimum wage, unable to take a loo break, probably their mental health will suffer, right? And that's an opinion, right? Mental health is on a continuum, okay? So there isn't this kind of strict well or unwell. There is a multitude of different colour greys. It's not black and white. There are different colour greys, and most people will be appearing somewhere on that spectrum. It's worth making time for mental health. It's worth, now this is twofold. It's worth making time to talk about, to think about one's own mental health. Even if you think there's no problem, it's worth giving some time and space to think about what you would like to be doing, whether you are doing what you like to be doing, whether there are any changes you need to make you happier. And not just in terms of immediate happiness. I don't mean going to buy a chocolate bar. It may be that. It might be that simple. But generally speaking, it's not. Generally speaking, it might be that you need to make some life changes. Mental health is part of being human. And this I think is a lovely idea that, by definition, the emotions which we have, and we read about this in Tillich, right? As we've been reading Tillich and looking at everything that Tillich has to say about how humans look at themselves in terms of being and non-being, grappling with the idea of death, grappling with the idea of existence, and coming to terms with the notion that in the end we all die, whilst at the same time putting that aside and focusing on the fact that we need to go and buy some eggs because the kids are coming home from school, right? They're going to need some dinner. And so there is this perpetual pushing and tugging in everyone's mind whilst we carry the bigger existential questions, which most people will carry and think about and mull over, especially when they are grieving or dealing with loss, and at the same time doing the things which are very often banal and boring and everyday, and not something necessarily one wants to get up for in the morning. Mental health is something we need to look after, and it's true, isn't it? It's true. It's very often the case that, and it's such a cliche, that doctors, oops, what's going on? Why can't I see on Facebook the stream? I don't know why. I don't know if I've got it going properly. I hope I have. I've just looked at there we are. Right, so there was a bit of a panic there because my phone hadn't updated. So my little monitor phone, which I have set up, I don't know why it got stuck, but I've suddenly come in. Anyway, now, so mental health is something which we do need to look after. The cliche is that doctors very often will be so focused on their patients that when they get something nagging, they don't take care of it. And they don't take care of it to the point that it's gone beyond treatment and it becomes very serious. They're bad patients. Very often lawyers and solicitors will not leave a will after they have died. The irony in all of these things. But in terms of mental health, we all need to stop and think about ourselves sometimes, and think about those who are around us. Okay, even if they don't present with these, behavioural differences, there is mental health going on. So actually, it's quite good to stop and check, to do a little MOT to decide, how are things? How am I feeling today? Mental health is positive and negative, as we have said already. We've covered that, I think, because, it's the same as physical health. A person can be physically fit, physically well, healthy, and, it's the same with mental health. Mental health is changeable. We can wake up early in the morning, clap our hands and say today is going to be a good day. But by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe it's not a good day. And so mental health can change within that day. It can also change over time. So the happy person can become very depressed. And we've got examples of this everywhere. You know, some of the funniest people in media go on to commit suicide, having lived with depression in a way which nobody was aware of. Robin Williams, actually, is the one I'm thinking of. He's the person who comes to mind. But again, it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? The saddest man in the room is the one who makes everyone laugh. Mental health is complex, and it's incredibly complex because it's all to do with brain chemicals and brain physiology. And in truth, we know more about the moon than we do about the brain. So it's incredibly complex, and it is real. I think a lot of things I read on Facebook are about, you know, I see these two groups of people really on Facebook, these two bubbles which I'm within. One bubble is very aware of things like this and taking care of oneself and everything else. And the other group seem to just be deniers of everything, deniers of mental health, calling everyone a snowflake, shouting about climate change, that it's not real and this sort of stuff. You know, I don't know. And most of, in truth, that's only because I'm a member of quite a few Christian groups on Facebook, and those two groups tend to fall into these very, you know, clear opposite in terms of values. They're two very distinct groups. I happen to see their posts. Anyway, now mental health isn't a sign of weakness. One of the things I think I sent it even to my nephew, who I'm very proud of, has gone off to study recently, and I won't give any information away about him because he's not too keen on Facebook and social media or anything like that. But I will say I'm jolly proud of him. He's gone off to university recently, a number of weeks ago, and I shared something with him because it was a story about a tribe, or some tribes in southern Africa, who, when someone in the tribe does something wrong, which is out of character, makes a serious mistake, maybe they've lied, maybe they've cheated, maybe they've stolen, maybe they've who knows what, the method that they adopt is to bring the person into the middle of the village, surround that person by the entire village population, and one by one, a person will stand in front of the person who's made this serious error of judgment and tell them what's good about them. They will stand in front of them and say why they are liked or loved, the difference that they have made in a positive way to this person's life. And the success rate is immeasurable. And this idea that mental health isn't a sign of weakness, I honestly think, it shouldn't have to be written down. Most of the things on the right-hand side shouldn't have to be written down, but it's cultural. We come from a culture really where boys, when they cry, are very often told off for crying. Well, they're hurting, aren't they? And instead of giving them a hug, they're being told off. There is always that and it's a cliche, but I remember it. I remember discussing it with my first friend in primary school many years ago. And I was chatting to Andrew, my friend. I suppose we must have been 5 or 6. And we had heard someone's mum say, "Stop crying or I will smack you." Well, just the fear of being smacked made the little boy, our peer in class, cry even more. And we chatted about it and thought that was a stupid idea because he didn't need a smack, he just needed to be cuddled by his mum. Anyway. Mental health is shameful. I think there is shame in mental health, but I don't think there should be because everyone's got it. Mental health isn't all in your mind. It's true. Very often we can assume that we are the only person suffering something, that we're the only person dealing with it, and we can have doubt about whether it's real. So instead of waking up and clapping our hands and saying this is going to be a good day, we might be laying in bed a bit longer than usual and believing that it's just laying in bed a bit longer than usual, rather than getting to the root cause, which is I'm not happy. Mental health isn't something to think about only when it feels broken. And this is what I was saying earlier on. This idea that we should, from time to time, routinely be having an MOT. And whether that's once every quarter, whether that's once every month, or whether that's once a week, or even every day, we should be stopping to say, how am I feeling about all this? Where I am? What's going on? Mental health isn't an interchangeable term with mental illness. Now, that's probably something which I am guilty of, because I know that I've said various terms, even in this transmission, which are probably very outdated. And if I have done that, it's out of ignorance. And if I've said anything that has caused anyone any kind of offence, that was not my intention, and I apologise for it. Mental health isn't feeling good all the time. No, it's really not. Mental health isn't something you can snap out of. And it isn't fixed by, whatever the current system is. Mental health will always be with us. It has always been with us, and it will always be with us. So, and it isn't fake news. As I told you, some of the folk on Facebook are quite keen to say that almost everything in these days is fake news. Now, let's go to the next slide. And the next slide we have, this is clear because it's got a source there, and it's from an organisation which is called Time to Talk, timetochange.org.uk. And it says 1 in 4 are affected by a mental health problem in any year. And I find this an interesting notion, an interesting idea, because I'm assuming that the people who watch this stream, the majority, I'm assuming, probably are Christians. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's a bias that isn't there. But I believe they probably are Christians. And that means they're probably going to church. And that means they're probably socialising with a group, at least a group of people in the congregation, if not they're members of other clubs or groups or whatever. And if you start adding up how many people you see across a week or across a month even, this number of 1 in 4 in a year becomes quite a large number quite quickly. And the interesting thing about that is we are not able, if you assume it is 1 in 4, I don't believe that they would have churned this statistic out without having researched it first. If we accept that it's 1 in 4, then think about everyone we know from those groups who we interact with every week or every month, and we try to count the number of people who we know have been affected by mental health problems in a year. The number we know is less than the actual number provided by the statistic. And that's because mental health isn't like a broken leg, because you can't see when someone has a mental health issue. and that's part of the problem. Now, anecdotally, I need to share, I think I've spoken about this a couple of times already on the stream, but anecdotally, I have a friend on Facebook who shocked me, really, a few days ago, because he's a young man, and he was very, very upset talking about the issue of mental health. And he shared the fact that one of his friends, who had featured on some of his other videos and things on Facebook, had recently committed suicide. And it transpires, actually, that wasn't the only suicide in the town. There had been one other very recently. And these two young men, they weren't connected. They don't, as far as I know, they're not connected, and they don't know each other. But I found it really, I suppose, disturbing, because it's this statistic we hear every time: suicide in this young person's age bracket. And I think the age bracket is like between 18 and 45. In men, in particular, suicide is the highest cause of death or something. I mean, it's a phenomenal number. It's like 4,500 people a year are committing suicide, and extremely disproportionate. 3 times as many young men commit suicide as young women. And a lot of that is to do with culture and how young men from a very young age are discouraged from sharing their feelings, expressing their feelings, crying, shouting, yelling, whatever, and dealing with the root cause of an emotional problem. Instead, they have to be the Superman, and that's a huge amount of pressure when they're dealing with something they probably don't really understand what's going on inside their mind. Now, we haven't had any comments, by the way. We've had no comments on Twitch. We've had no comments on Facebook about this issue so far. So there's nothing for me to deal with. If there were questions, if there were any kind of feedback, then I would be incorporating that into the transmission. But so far, there's been none. I'm sorry to say. Now, the last slide we have, we've only got 3. It came from, I think this one I do have a source. I think this one came from FE. Is it FE News, Further Education News? Okay. And it's a very interesting one, because it provides us with a snapshot in relation specifically to the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown and these sorts of things. And I found it very telling that 66% of respondents to the FE News survey had said that their mental health had suffered. And I mean, that's I mean, of course, and this is not, I don't say this because it's surprising. I say it because it's unsurprising. But we're dealing with that group, that high-risk group of young people who, like my nephew, are going off to university, being separated from their families for the first time in many cases, travelling far away from their families in many cases for the first time, having to live with strangers for the first time, but at the same time having to maintain social distances because of COVID. So, living in halls, for example, isn't what living in halls used to be. They have lots of protocols in place now to ensure that nobody's travelling to this place or that place, or, mucking about like they used to. So, I think there are enormous pressures on young people who have just gone off to university, having had the last 18 months of their education completely ruined by COVID. completely isolated from their friends for the last, off and on, in many cases, but nevertheless, for the last 18 months. Relationships have been profoundly destroyed because of this. I'm just concerned about it. Now, how does this relate to our stream? How does this relate to church? Let's bring it back to what this is, the purpose of all of this is. And I think as a body, a group of people, I think it's remarkably easy to just do a kind of, let's check which way the wind blows in terms of this individual or that individual. And in fact, we should be checking which way the wind blows with everyone who's in church, with everyone we get to speak to. And I think that there is a particular responsibility of Christians to check and ask how people are. That's all we're asking. How are you? How are you now? What's going on? How's life? Right? And, we do have to think about I say this very clearly because I think it needs to be said. It's not just about saying, okay, we know such and such a person in the congregation is having a tough time and is sick. Let's pray for them. Of course, that's the first thing. But also, what else do they need? They need company. They need people to go round and help them out. They need routine. If they're older people suffering, and I've been talking a lot about young people, if they're older people suffering with their mental health, maybe because of isolation, maybe because of a lack of routine, maybe they're not doing the gardening anymore like they used to because they can't. Maybe they need someone to help cut the grass. Maybe they need somebody to come round and just have a cup of tea with them 2 or 3 times a week. Now, of course, it depends on the size of your church. But having a tea and chat is great, in the church. That's brilliant. In the church hall, tea and chat, get elderly people out of the house, get them to come along. But if an elderly person is suffering with depression, if an elderly person is suffering with their mental health, they're not going to go out. They're isolated. They can barely get to church on a Sunday. And if they do, they don't stay for fellowship. They leave and go home early. And those people are the people we need to be saying, well, they always tend to go before we ever get to chat to them. I don't know them very well. Go and get to know them. Go and get to know them. Know who they are. Find out who they are. Find out what biscuits they like and take them a packet of biscuits, right? If you're having a barbecue in your garden, why not invite them to the barbecue, right? Why not, coax them out, but if they're not coming out, go round. And there are safe ways to do that. There are safeguarding procedures where you can tell people where you're going. You can go as a pair so that you're not going anywhere on your own. You're certainly not, putting yourself at risk going to strangers' houses. So it's very important to talk it over with somebody who's responsible in your church, of course. It's very important to follow whatever protocols are in place for safeguarding, of course. But once all of those tick boxes and everything has been said and done, which probably means just giving someone a tinkle to say, I'm just going into this house to have a cup of tea. I'll give you a call in an hour when I leave. If I don't call you in 1 hour, give me a call. If I don't answer, then raise the alarm. Fine, do that. So there are lots of things we can all do as Christians. And I think if people are having a tough time getting to church, then go round and knock on the door, and do something. I think if you are not having to knock on the door and going around and doing something, then why not take church to them? Why not talk to them about what happened in church? Why not talk to them about the sermon or homily that the vicar gave on Sunday? Why not pray with them as well as praying for them when you're not in their company? Now, okay, that's the end of my rant, I suppose. It ended with a bit of a rant, but I think it's required. I think we all need to stop and think. Now, I know I've said that we're going to have mental health, Pritchard and Kimball, but you know what? I think that it can be a standalone thing. I think mental health is big enough that it shouldn't have to share the space with any of the books we normally read. So I think that's it. Without any comments, I think that's what we're going to do. We've done, I've been chatting for about 40 odd minutes. So I think following that, I think it's probably an idea. Now, where was I? Now, I do need to sort one thing out because I haven't done it. So let me just sort that out now. Today was quite a busy day. I'm going to tell you what we've had as a day, and that will explain things. So first of all, I think I can share with you the fact that we have 900 likes on our Facebook fan page, and that's a big celebration. This is a bit like parish notices at the end of something. It was really good, so we've celebrated that and we've posted onto our fan page with a little firework display and something rather lovely, and hopefully we will end up getting some more, right? If we get some more followers on Facebook, that would be very, very good. Now, the other thing that happened was I found out, I think it was during the stream a few days ago, probably on Friday even. So it was on Friday, and we were looking at the Church Times headlines, and as I was looking at the Church Times headlines, I noticed that there was this little this little thing that said ordinands can get the Church Times for free. Now that was new information for me. I didn't know that, and so I had a slot free in my day, and as I had a slot free in my day, I phoned up Church Times to say to them, look, what's going on here? I understand that you are allowing folk to get Church Times for free. And there was a lovely woman who said, yes, that's absolutely right. Where are you studying? And she told me where I told her where I was studying. And she just, I heard keyboards clacking. And suddenly it's free. So she's cancelled the subscription for Church Times. And I've got free Church Times between now and when my online course finishes in 3 years' time. So, well, that's really good. So that's two bits of very, very good news. And I think that's good to share because we've talked about mental health and, it can be a bit tough. And I think a couple of bits of good news is just good, right? Now we've got, I'm going to give a shout out to Kevin Bell, who is watching, and also there's a Thai name watching, which I unfortunately can't pronounce. I wish I could say your name, but whatever your name is, thanks for watching. Now, let me just now share with you the Lord's Prayer, and if you are able, if you feel able, you can join me as I say this, or if you are wanting to, you can just stay silent, remain silent, pause, and just remain in deep thought. Now let us pray with confidence to the Father as our Saviour has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Lord of creation, whose glory is around and within us, open our eyes to your wonders, that we may serve you with reverence and know your peace at our lives' end. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So, thank you very much to everyone who's stuck through to the end of this transmission. We've been going now for about 50 minutes. We haven't had many comments at all. We haven't had any comments at all, which is something that I'm always inviting you to do. Please get involved. Tell me if I've said something wrong or done something wrong, or if you've got some fresh ideas. Without further ado, I'm going to say, with prayers and best wishes, bye-bye for now.